Like most people in the West, I've focused on our intelligence agencies like the CIA and the MI5, MI6, and people talk about the OSS before it. They don't really talk about the KGB, and I've heard yourself and Trevor Loudon said many, many times that the KGB have had considerable influence over global politics for years. And again, most people don't focus on that. They focus on the CIA and the intelligence agencies we have in the West. So, could you just outline how much of an impact the KGB has had compared to our intelligence agencies? Have they been that much more powerful?
Yes, in fact, if you talk to a major historian, I forget his name now. He was on with Lex. Forget his name, the podcaster.
Lex
He was a
Friedman.
major historian, Lex Friedman. He was on with him. It was an excellent interview. And the first thing is he said, "Well, who's the best intelligence service in the world?" And he said, "Well, the Russians."
Wow.
And this is what I've talked to KGB and GRU guys, defectors, and I would say to them, who's the best intelligence service in the world? Well, we are. Well, who's next best? The ones that we trained, the Chinese, the Cubans, the East Germans, right? Where's the CIA? Look, and it's cultural. I think Andrei Navrazov, the Russian poet and writer, columnist, told me this years ago. He said, "Look, it's not a conspiracy as much as it's a cultural advantage." Because you go back to Ivan the Terrible, and with his black shirts that he created this intelligence service around himself to protect his throne. This goes back. That's 500 years ago. Well, it's more than 500. It's almost 500 years ago, and so that's a long tradition of perfecting an institution that it was called the Okhrana under the czars. It got taken over by the Bolsheviks in the revolution. They just integrated it into their own thing, and they with the revolutionary conspiracist, conspiratorial political party idea of Lenin, you add the secret police, you make them aggressive, and you send them out. You have the formula for something really incredible. It's almost like the mating of two really dangerous animals to make an even more dangerous animal. And so, just to give you an idea, when at the end of the Cold War, the KGB domestically inside Russia had 1 million people working for it, the KGB, right?
Wow.
So, how many people do you think work for the CIA?
I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to say
This is
600.
this is people who are paid. No, no, no. 22,000 people work for the CIA. So
Oh,
compare
wow.
22,000 CIA employees with 1 million KGB employees in Russia. What the size of the does size matter? If you invade somebody with 1 million men and they only have 22,000, do you think they'd stand a chance? How can the
Wow.
22,000 of the CIA cope with 1 million of the KGB? Look at the FBI has how many FBI employees are there? There's 37,000 FBI employees. Now, by the way, the FBI mostly does white collar crime. They don't do counterintelligence. Probably only 4 or 5 thousand FBI officers deal with counterintelligence. John Barron, when he wrote the book The KGB around 1980, and then he wrote the new KGB, he estimated there were over 50,000 at that time. This is 45 years ago. 50,000 East Bloc agents in the United States. So you're having, 3,000 FBI guys running around after, and I don't, you know what, I'm just going to enter this in and say, how many FBI employees, or no, not employees, officers are engaged. It might even be classified in counterintelligence work. Now that counterintelligence is looking for somebody else's spies.
Hmm.
2,000. Okay, I overestimated the
Wow.
number. So you got 2,000 people trying to find 50,000 operating against your country.
Wow.
Now I can tell you after the fall of the Soviet Union and when we got flooded with Russians and we're flooded with Chinese now. And there's Cubans and there's other look, there could be 1 million foreign agents in this country now. And you got 2,000. Now you've increased 20-fold the threat in your country, and we've got an open border where people are just have been pouring across, especially under the Biden administration. Then we've got corporations in bed with China, actively giving them technology, actively making exchanges to and make themselves wealthy. And we've got Chinese companies and Russian front companies in this country. They own warehouses, they own docks, they own wind farms. There was a wind farm in Texas some years ago, not just a few years ago. Kyle Bass got interested in it, if you know who Kyle Bass is. And he went looking at this. There was this wind farm in Texas was owned by a Chinese general, People's Liberation Army general, who was a billionaire, and he was building a 10,000-foot runway there. And Kyle Bass realized this place is terrible for a wind farm. It doesn't have the right wind, doesn't have the right weather for a wind farm. This is not a wind farm. This is something else. He went before the Texas legislature and they shut it down. But there's wind farms like that all over the western United States, owned by China. So what are on the property of these wind farms? Are there bunkers? If there's 10,000-foot runway they were building in Texas, are there warehouses? Are there weapons stored there? Are there uniforms? Are these Chinese that have been crossing the border under Biden? The tens of thousands of Chinese are among them People's Liberation Army soldiers now that are working or staying at those wind farms. Are we being infiltrated by an enemy army? I mean, look, we don't, like I say, we have these tiny police agencies, and we are overrun by crime. We don't have enough people to even deal with the criminals we've got. So we've got this thing to go on here and then you have drug crime. People don't realize that in 1960, after studying the problem for 5 years, Russia and China decided to launch an opium war, a drug war against the United States and the West. It was called Operation Friendship of Nations. We learned about it through a defector named Jan Shana, a book, a very well-researched book by Joe Douglas, the late Joe Douglas, was called Red Cocaine, The Drugging of America and the World. You can find the PDF online if you're interested in reading it. It's a very important book, and it's about how they wanted to infiltrate international organized crime because of the political intelligence, the blackmail, the ability to control police, to control corrupt judges and corrupt government officials, because you've got all this money and you've got all this money to launder from drug trafficking. It's the money laundering that gives you power over people. Oh, gee, I want a taste of that money, right? And so how many people do you own then that you could turn over? And then you've got the pedophile ring stuff. And I've got information on that. So the KGB is so powerful. You think the tiny CIA, 22,000 employees versus the KGB, 1 million employees, you think the people that are doing all this stuff in the world, it's all the CIA?